So I literally called the coach who was before mine and was just like, hey, has there ever been a Black girl to swim at UNC Chapel Hill ever? And he was like, no, there have been some Black guys in the 90s. They didn't finish, but there have been some Black guys. I had a Black teammate at the time, and then Cliff ended up joining, but there's never been a Black woman. And I just sat there and received that, like, wow.
What brought you guys to the sport, to swim, especially in a sport that might not have always looked like you or had people that looked like you to look up to? And I'd love if all of y'all answer, so I'm good with whoever starts.
Okay, I'll start. I started swimming because I was at the YMCA and I used to do year-round school. So track out camp, we always had to go swim. And the YMCA basically had like color levels. And it was like red, yellow, and black. And I wanted to be at the black level because, I mean, you could get to go anywhere. And I was only at the red. And so I was really discouraged. And I kind of like self-taught myself by like a little drown a little bit. Okay, you're okay. We breathe. We can keep going. And from there, I honestly saw kids swimming like up and down laps. And so I just literally asked my mom, like, what do those kids do? We looked into the YMCA to join a team. From there, I was just going like a couple times a week. And then ultimately just started committing to competitive swimming around the age of 8.
For me, we actually had a pool in my backyard growing up. And my dad and my mom didn't want me or my sister to be out there unsupervised. And just in case we were, and we fell in, they wanted us to be able to, get back to the side and get out without any trouble. So, they enrolled us in swim lessons over at Delaware Swim School. And I hated it. I'll be completely honest. I didn't like the cold water. That was my biggest thing. I just didn't want to be cold. So I would kick and fuss and scream and punch and kick. And then somebody must have realized I had a little bit of talent. So they told my dad or my mom, hey, you got to keep him in this, get him to stick with this. So ended up sticking with it, and here we are.
I grew up watching my brother swim. My brother also swam competitively. And my parents always thought it was very important for us to know how to swim because of how many kids were dying when we were growing up and drowning specifically. And so my parents thought that was really important. And I also live right next door to a community pool. And so they always thought that it was really important, especially because I have this community pool next to me.
The Black swimmer community is rather small, whether that's in your state or expanding nationally. Are there any events or meets that you all attended or that you saw each other at and like started this friendship, this relationship?
I'm honestly not sure how Cliff and I met. Besides,
we met at the Black Heritage meet because I was on the Aqua Blazers. 100%.
Okay.
Can you guys expand just like on the Black History meet or Black Heritage meet and like what that encompasses and what it's like?
Sure. So the DC meet is the Black History meet that happens every year during Martin Luther King weekend. And we, as Aqua Blazers, we started as an AAU team, and we wanted to start our own meet where we all be on the same team together. So we created the National Black Heritage Meet, basically a lot of Black kids around the North Carolina community, and then encompassing everyone from around the entire state. Entire country pretty much started to come. We started out our first meet 17 years ago, the National Black Heritage Meet, with 100 swimmers. And then now we have over 1,100 kids that come every year. So it pretty much is a mom and pop word of mouth meet. There is no promotion. We do not have a marketing team. We don't have a marketing campaign. Teams will just start coming in one year. They'll bring 5 people to just test out the waters to see if it's like legit. And then after they have like the bomb weekend, they're like, okay, next year we're bringing 20. And like, I wish I was exaggerating, but that's literally how it goes. Like one year you bring a van, the next year you bring a charter bus. So it's really word of mouth. And all of us have gotten the opportunity to experience it just because somebody told somebody else, like, this is this meet where like there's a bunch of Black kids come, they swim and they're actually fast and competitive. And you actually have this opportunity to meet others and make that connection. So it's been just something that kind of just has taken a life of its own.
Well, I went to both of those meets when I was younger. We started going to those meets, my family and a few other Black families that were on my team and also on another team that swims very close to us. We started going to those meets, and my parents always made it a point to make sure that we went to those meets. because it was always really exciting for us to see other Black kids at a swim meet. And so many of us all in one place. It was really exciting. So we always went to that meet, or both of them.
I know like having that space is always like necessary, but obviously that wasn't the norm or for like nationals or competitive swimming in general. Did you guys ever experience pressure to excel a little bit higher because of your race, or feel that you had to just prove a little bit more because of your race?
Sure. I think that you're naturally good, right? So we all are naturally talented, and that kind of just came with it. But when you're good already as a swimmer, you stand out. So being a Black swimmer is even more so. Okay, I stand out and I'm great, and there's more questions like, so why are you good? Do Black people have an extra bone in their body? That's why you're a sprinter. That's why you can't do distance. Like there's just different like stereotypical questions, ignorant, prejudiced questions that you experience because nobody can understand why you're good at this sport that not a lot of people are good at. So you get those type of questions. You get questions. I remember like when I was getting ready to go to college, a lot of people were telling my mom that I was going to get a scholarship solely because I was Black, not because I was qualified or could, be amongst the rest of the girls that were on the team, but simply because they needed someone to like check a box, and it was great. So swimming is just one of those sports where I'm like, unfortunately, you deal with a lot of racism, but the reality is it's very black and white. Either you can make the times or you can't.
For me in college at that point, it was kind of like, yeah, I was the Black kid on the team, or I was one of the two Black kids on the team. Like, we get it. But for us, it wasn't really as, at least on the men's side, as far as the team members, it wasn't as much of a focus point. So I didn't feel like I had to prove something to them because I was Black, but to the coaches a little bit, well, to the head of our program, yeah. But for me, it was more in like high school, just, because I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, so, a lot of white kids at that school, not a lot of Black kids. Now there were more than there were when I went to middle school and things like that, because I was very fortunate to be able to go to private school my whole life. But in doing so, you don't get to experience a lot of people who look like you. So, in high school, there was a very few of us. There's about 10 of us, and there's probably about 15 or 20 kids of color, which is actually a pretty significant amount out of like 250, but still out of 250, that's not a lot. So for them, even to the Black kids, it was like, oh, like you're Black and you swim, you don't play basketball or you don't play football. I'm like, nope, I'm a swimmer, man. And not that I can't. I was perfectly good at those sports. I was actually very good at those sports, but I was better at swimming. And then, you're at the meets and you're the only Black kid at the meet. And, like one of the kids on our team would say sometimes like, oh, our Black kid's faster than yours. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. That's really not what we're here for. But since you're going to make that statement, I'm going to prove that I'm faster than all of your kids, but that's fine. So that's kind of like the mentality you had to take at that point. So for me, it was more high school than it was college as far as trying to prove something to my teammates, the peers around me.
For me, I feel like a lot of the issues that I had or that I had were with other kids being in competition with me. I wasn't necessarily in competition with them. I would go and I'd swim my race, and sure, I'd try and win whatever heat I was in, obviously, or win an event. But I was really focused on getting a better time or winning that heat or that event. But there were a lot of kids who, outside of a race, would focus on what I'm doing or my time or how good I did in this. As parents as well. It was also parents who did the same thing. Encouraging that kind of behavior in their kids. And so that's something that I've always thought about and experienced for quite a while. And it's always upsetting to think about because this is a very time-driven sport. This sport is all about you in competition with yourself. So it's always been very interesting and disheartening to hear that so many people are in competition with someone other than themselves.
I feel like when it comes to experiencing racism in sports, it's mainly within like microaggressions. You see it more. Are there any like specific ones?
I would say like for me, I've seen it happen actually more like when I'm doing my sport and someone that's not in my sport will comment on something. So like I remember one time I was in the gym doing box jumps, and a coach for another team at Carolina, he saw me doing box jumps, and he was like, "What sport do you play?" And I was like, "Swimming." Just very casually answered the question, "Swimming." He was like, "No, seriously, like, what sport do you play?" And I was like, "Swimming." And it took him a second. He was like, "Oh, wait, this guy is serious. He's actually a swimmer." And to me, it's like, well, yes, A, black people can swim. B, yes, swimmers are actually athletes. I don't understand why this is so confusing to everyone.
So I've definitely experienced the hair microaggressions. I had one person on my swim team once ask me if I could brush my hair. And I said, yeah. She's like, how? But like, it's always in braids. I was like, well, you take your hair out of braids, don't you? So there have been experiences like that where I've been like, how do you not understand the basic concept?
I think the reason why today I say my responses are so flippant is because I have had those questions asked to me so many times. So it's like, what do you do with your hair? Well, I don't know. Wash it, shampoo, conditioner. What do? Do you know you put it in grass first? Or, let me know. Is there some new style I didn't try? It's just those type of things where I just joke it off. I always try to acknowledge the elephant in the room. So if a girl's like, "Oh my God, I need to go tanning," I'm like, "Girl, me too." Like I just want to, you like that sense of being included, right? So I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so pale." I'm not pale at all, but if that makes for everyone to get a good laugh off, fine, whatever. So I think it's those things I've experienced that honestly, I've had that since club swimming, that it rolls off, like it doesn't faze me anymore. However, it is wrong. But it's almost to the point where you get so used to it that you're just like, okay, another day, another ignorant person.
Kind of to take it to UNC, obviously, Brieanna will meet in fall, hopefully, with everything going on. But Candace and Cliff, you guys want to talk about your UNC experience?
Yeah, well, first, the option of going to an HBCU was going to Howard, and that's it to swim. So when you think about an opportunity to further your education and you're telling as a Black person, like, well, you need to go to HBCU to, stick to your cause, stick to the culture. So you're giving me one option. Everybody else in the world gets thousands of options, but in order to pursue what I want to do, I only get one. Like, that doesn't seem fair. And then I also don't feel like I have to justify why I chose to go to a PWI, because I wanted to swim and there wasn't many options. So in thinking about going to Carolina, like, I don't regret my decision, because that's exactly what I want to do. I wanted to compete at the highest level. I wanted to be that girl who swam on a team like Carolina. So for that, I'm always grateful. But with that comes, typical issues that unfortunately, when you are the first person to do it, there's a lot of, hey, I don't know what you are. I don't know how to deal with you. Therefore, I'm not going to try and relate to you. I'm just going to ask you to fall in line. So I tried my best to be myself, but still fall in line. And unfortunately, that comes with a lot of resistance from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I would say she's pretty spot on with that. I would say for me, kind of the easiest thing, as I'd mentioned earlier, was just being around my teammates. So very fortunately for me, especially, you see the climate now, sometimes being a Black person in the South can be challenging. So very fortunately for me, at least half of my teammates were from the North. So they kind of, I'm not going to necessarily say my white teammates kind of had an understanding, but they came from a different area of the country where certain things that are said or certain things that are done are just not acceptable, whether you're a person of color or whether you're just a person in general. So they kind of, I was able to kind of mesh with my teammates much, much, much better than I was with, to say, like, the head of our program. He was from down here, wasn't very social as a person in general. Kind of, I think, was used to kind of swimmers not voicing their opinion or kind of being very, in line, in step. And anybody who knows me, I'm not like that. I mean, Candace, I swam with Candace for a full year. There's times we got into it, and I'm not gonna back off. She ain't gonna back off, and that's just how we are, and that's how it is. I understood that, and I respect that about Candace. Whereas, the head of our program, he didn't really like that. If you didn't really want to do what he wanted to do, or you weren't quiet or in line with everybody, you weren't one of his favorites. So, for me, it was more challenging just trying to kind of just be in my program, and by the end, just not really be bothered by this one person.
When I look at how college kids are now, which I applaud, like everyone's speaking up, and I wish I just had that confidence back then. But I think when you're so used to just having to be that one where you stand out for different reasons, it's like, I don't want to stand out for being the one who's too vocal. I don't want to stand out for being the one who has an attitude, because that's all they need, right? They just need one time for to blow up, and it's like, she's that girl, right?
But you were also in a little bit different position too. You know, you were the first to do it. I'm not the one that had to take it in the teeth going through the door. You know, I got to come in being loud and being like, hey, I wasn't the first one that had to do this. Yeah. So, you know, for me, it's a little bit different, because, you know, you have to be very careful about what you're doing so that the rest of us can have the opportunity to be who I was able to be, and not really have to, you know, worry about it at the end of the day. Like, oh, do I care what this person thinks of me? Nope, not really, because this 95% of people think this of me.
You know, we've been touching around it, but Candace, you were the first Black female to swim at UNC. When did you come to that realization, or is it something you just kind of knew coming into, and like, did that change your perspective on UNC Swim? Not giving them excuses, but change your perspective.
Never give excuses for being ignorant. Never. Willful ignorance is not okay, because when you're trying to build a culture of diversity, whether it be from someone from New Jersey or, you know, Bumble, Alabama, you're required to expand your thinking. But I was an African American Studies major, and I was doing my senior thesis on the plight of the Black athlete, right? So I'm trying to figure out just why the Black athlete is not allowed to voice their opinions at PWIs. Like, when people back in the day in the 80s and 90s were doing sit-ins, like, those Black students, you know, were regular, whatever, NARB. I call them NARBs, you know, normal, everyday, whatever. Okay.
Non-athletic, regular people, yeah.
Thank you. So when they were doing sit-ins and they were trying to make change and they were being vocal, it was one of those things where some of those guys really were about it. Like, you know, you had those basketball players like George Lynch, who were ready to have those sit-ins and whatever. But there are a lot of guys whose scholarships were taken away from football teams. And, you know, some basketball people were given that, like, all right, I mean, I get it, but relax. So I just wanted to study why. It was specifically the Sonia Haynes Center when they were trying to not get it built. And so I did this whole paper on it. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, of course, I'm not going to know about any swimmer who kind of stepped up. Why do I not know any swimmer? Because there's never been one. So I literally called the coach who was before mine. It was just like, hey, has there ever been a Black girl to swim at UNC Chapel Hill ever? And he was like, no, there have been some Black guys in the 90s. They didn't finish, but there have been some Black guys. I had a Black teammate at the time, and then Cliff ended up joining, but there's never been a Black woman. And I just sat there and received that, like, wow. I never thought I had to use that fact. I don't really talk about it. I don't really share it. It's not one of those things like I lead with, because it's sad to me. Like, it's not something that I feel joyful about. I mean, I don't feel like in 2012, the first girl that looks like me was me to swim at a D1, you know, program. So there's been many before me at other programs, but at Carolina, when we preach diversity, we preach all these things about growing and being that school. Okay, we still have these issues, right? We still have these things, but we're still far behind on so many different levels. And so for me, I just sat back and received it in the sense of like, okay, I was first, but I damn sure will not be last. And I will make a point when I'm done healing from my time to go back and pour into. And then honestly, the universe responded, and here's Bree. So I'm just going to say, I believe in stars aligning.
And Bree, that's when I turn to you. What are you looking forward to most about starting your collegiate career at UNC? Granted, this time that we're in, I don't think it ever stopped, but we're having this resurgence of Black Lives Matter. What are you looking forward to about your collegiate experience?
Well, I'm really excited because I feel like this is really a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky to have this opportunity and to be able to be excited for this experience. Not only as a college, but I also get to be a college athlete, which is something that's really exciting to me. And in terms of what's happening in the world right now and what's being perceived in the world and how I think that my generation is doing something. And I think we're going to change a lot of things. And so I think it's very exciting to see some of my future teammates really using their voice. And I've been looking at that and seeing that and receiving that.
I wish I could do Collegiate at a time when you can now be vocal. Like, hell yeah, bro, you about to have the time of your life, and you get to speak up and you get to say things. And I'm like, you get to practice hard, you get to kick asses all the time. Like, this is lit. I'm hyped for you, and I have not been hyped about something in a very long time.